Welcome, bookish souls, to a sanctuary where the love for reading knows no bounds. Today, we embark on a soul-stirring journey through the pages of The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. If you're vibing with my content, show your support by smashing that like button and subscribing, following my channel. And let's take it a step further. Leave a comment and let's create a sense of community where we can connect and engage. Part 1, Chapters 1-5. The Unbearable Lightness of Being follows the stories of four main characters: Tomas, Teresa, Sabina, and Franz. Through the characters' interaction and reflections on their own lives, they come to significant conclusions and revelations about life and themselves. Milan Kundera begins The Unbearable Lightness of Being by discussing Nietzsche's idea of eternal return. This idea states everything recurs as we once experienced it, and that the recurrence itself recurs ad infinitum. Conversely, a life that disappears, not to return, is meaningless and without weight. Kundera uses a war between two African kingdoms in the French Revolution to illuminate his point that because we do not live by the idea of eternal return, these horrific events lose the immediate emotional impact and power because they become mere words, stories, and discussions. Kundera contends that because the world abides by the notion that there is a non-existence of return, everything is pardoned in advance and therefore cynically permitted. Kundera further conditions the story by explaining his theory of lightness versus weight. Lightness, it would seem, is the most enviable, as it is without burden. However, Kundera points out that the woman longs to be weighted down by man's body, and that the weight of life's burdens is what grounds one and makes life meaningful. By Chapter 3, Kundera begins to introduce the characters. He first starts with Tomas, introducing him as an old friend, creating a relationship between the narrator and the main character. Kundera discusses how Tomas and Teresa met. Their relationship happens in an instant. They meet an hour before Tomas boards a train. 10 days later, Teresa visits, they make love, and she comes down with the flu. Tomas falls in love with Teresa as he nurses her to health. He also begins to question himself about his emotions for this girl, who is virtually a stranger to him. Tomas is a womanizer and goes to great lengths to keep his life unattached. However, he is overcome with emotion for Teresa and struggles with the decision to be free of her or to embrace her into his life. Tomas's query has no answer in this world, as there is no eternal return. Kundera explains there is no means of testing which decision is better, because there is no basis for comparison. In Chapter 4, we find out that Tomas is a doctor. He receives a phone call from Teresa between surgeries. She has come to Prague uninvited and is waiting at the train station for him. Teresa arrives with a small handbag dangling from her shoulder and the book Anna Karenina under her arms. After making love, she informs Thomas that her suitcase is at the train station and she is awaiting the invitation to bring it with her. Tomas recalls his wife and son, and the divorce that has led him to his current lifestyle. He analyzes his idea of erotic friendships and the rules he created to ensure he keeps to his unattached bachelor life. Tomas introduces Sabina, his favorite mistress, and asks her to help Teresa get a job in the darkroom at an illustrated weekly. Part 1, Chapter 6-10. Tomas begins breaking his own rules of bachelorhood by sharing the bed with Teresa in sleep. This makes him conclude that one may desire many women sexually, but there are few that a man can simply share sleep with. Tomas is beginning to grow true feelings for Teresa. One night, Teresa has a nightmare from reading Sabina's erotic letter to Tomas. Teresa realizes that she is not the only woman in Tomas's life, and it haunts her. Tomas tries to reconcile his infidelity and assure himself that he can keep both his bachelor life and Teresa. His naivety is further shown when he hypocritically demands fidelity from Teresa. Teresa continues having vivid nightmares about Tomas's sexual exploits and feels victimized during each episode. In Chapter 9, Kundera goes back to instruction and gives the etymological difference between the Latin word for compassion and the psychic equivalent. Compassion in Latin is associated with pity, or to feel superior to the one you regard with empathy. They are a victim, and you are above them. However, in Tomas's case, he feels the Czech idea of compassion, which is to endure the same pain as the person who is suffering. Tomas suffers alongside Teresa, while she broods over Tomas's infidelity. Tomas is overcome with empathy, as he sees the torment Teresa feels because of his cheating. Although Teresa broke his trust by reading his letters, Tomas is more sympathetic to her pain caused by the letters than angry about the broken trust. Tomas struggles to keep both Teresa and his bachelorhood going. He cannot give up his cheating despite the tremendous guilt he feels about it. To cope with his nagging conscience, Tomas drinks to dull his senses and carry out the affairs. The pinnacle of this internal battle presents itself when he is with Sabina. He cannot take his eyes off of his watch as they make love. To get even, Sabina hides his sock and makes Tomas wear one of her stockings home. He is humiliated by his mistress and exposed as a weak and corrupted man. Part 1, Chapters 11-17. Tomas marries Teresa to ease her suffering and assure her of his love for her. He also buys her a puppy, which they name Karenin after a character in Anna Karenina. The puppy immediately takes to Teresa, and Tomas is relieved that another being is there to give affection to Teresa to take some of that burden from himself. While Prague is overrun by Russian tanks, a colleague of Tomas's calls to offer him a job in Zurich. Tomas rejects the offer because he feels that Teresa is happy in Prague. During the occupation, Teresa photographs the tanks and the soldiers. She is arrested, but this only excites her more. She is beginning to become independent herself and enjoys the new adventure. However, her fascination with the war wears off, and they decide to leave Prague for Geneva at Teresa's prodding. Sabina also lives in Geneva and has become a very successful artist. Tomas returns to cheating with Sabina. Teresa realizes Tomas will never stop cheating, and she blames herself for forcing herself into Tomas's life. Teresa takes Karenin and leaves Tomas to move back to Prague, apologizing for not being able to bolster Tomas up. While Tomas is at first devastated by the idea that he cannot get Teresa back, he eventually begins to reconcile her leaving to himself. One day, Teresa came to him uninvited. One day, she left the same way. Tomas begins to feel free, a lightness of being without the responsibility of his relationship with Teresa. He is uplifted and anxious to begin his life, as he had started it before Teresa as a free and unattached bachelor. This feeling does not last very long. He quickly returns to thinking of Teresa. The weight of this melancholy is stronger than the flippant freedom he thought he coveted. Tomas quits his job and returns back to Prague and Teresa. He repeats a line from a Beethoven movement as must sing. It must be. As he is on his way back to Prague, he begins to think about whether this really must be. He wonders if he had let the torturous melancholy pass. Maybe he could return to the lightness of being that he first felt when Teresa was gone. However, as Kundera has already instructed, one cannot act on this because there has been no precedent for it. As Tomas lay next to the sleeping Teresa, he remembers Teresa telling him that if she had not met Tomas, she would have fallen in love with his friend Z. Thomas begins to think that maybe she could be happy with someone else. He questions his thought esmacine. He thinks that maybe this is all circumstantial, and he lies next to her, awake in despair and with pressure in his stomach. Part 2, chapters 1-6. Kundera relates the origins of the characters of Tomas and Teresa. Tomas was born of the saying, Einmal ist keinmal. What happens once might as well not have happened at all. Teresa was born of the rumbling of a stomach. He describes how Teresa could not stop her stomach from rumbling when she got to Thomas's flat the first time, and was mortified until Tomas comforted her. Kundera relates this incident to the irreconcilable duality of body and soul. Kundera discusses how scientific progress has explained bodily functions. However, when it comes to love, there is no comfort or peace of mind when your stomach is growling in front of your lover. Kundera begins to uncover Teresa's background. Teresa looks in the mirror and tries to see her soul. She does not look at her body in a scientific way, only as a vessel containing her soul that periodically shows through to her amazement and jubilation. Teresa is as beautiful as her mother once was. Teresa's mother had many suitors, but ultimately married the man who impregnated her with Teresa. As Teresa's mother gets older, she rejects Teresa and her own aging body. She leaves Teresa and her husband for a contemptible man. Teresa's father dies from his misery, and Teresa goes to live with her mother, the swindler, and 3 children. Teresa's mother blames Teresa for the terrible state her life has become, and Teresa accepts the guilt as sacrifice to her mother. Teresa does not understand that it is her mother's decisions that have led to this undesirable life. Teresa's father was not careful when making love to her mother, and she became pregnant with Teresa. Teresa's mother blames this event, and Teresa, for the downfall of her life. Teresa feels tremendous guilt and does anything she can to make up for it. Her mother takes her out of school, and Teresa becomes a waitress. She gives all of her earnings to her mother. Teresa's life with her mother and stepfather exposes her to ugliness and depravity. Teresa's mother prances around naked with no shame, while her stepfather watches her take baths. Teresa's mother mocks her for her modesty about herself and her mother's indecent behavior. Part 2, Chapter 7-12. Teresa's mother becomes increasingly grotesque in appearance and behavior. She discards any remnant of beauty or refinement. She has divided her life between her time as a youthful beauty and her life now as an ugly spectacle. Teresa is captive in this revolting world, waiting for her opportunity to escape. At the restaurant where Teresa works, old drunken men constantly harass her. One day, Thomas comes into the restaurant and reads a book. He is the opposite of the banality and repulsiveness that pervades her life. He does not know the awful things that are said and done to her. Teresa also recognizes his book as a weapon that she has in common with him. Teresa considers books the symbol of a secret brotherhood of those who are different from her mother and the old drunks. Kundera jumps forward in time to Tomas and Teresa in Prague. Tomas analyzes his decision to return to Teresa in Prague from Zurich. He, again, thinks about the 6 improbable fortuities that have brought him to her. Teresa thinks back to an encounter with a quartet who played Beethoven that has become her beacon for something higher. She knows that she must somehow escape her depressing surroundings. Teresa interprets signs that lead her to Tomas. Beethoven playing when she serves Tomas in the restaurant, the number 6 on his bill in her room, reading, and Tomas sitting on her favorite park bench. Kundera ruminates about the ideas of fortuity and coincidence. He applies these thoughts to Teresa's encounter with Tomas. Kundera also compares the meeting of Tomas and Teresa to Anna and Vronsky from the book Anna Karenina that Teresa has tucked under her arm when she visits Thomas. Kundera contends that it is important for man to recognize the coincidences that occur in daily life and understand the motifs that are created by them. Teresa interprets all of these signs as destiny and leaves home for Prague. When she arrives at Tomas's place, her stomach is rumbling. She imagines the stomach rumbling is her mother trying to ruin this moment for her. She is relieved when Tomas ignores her stomach, rumbling, and takes her into his arms. She immediately becomes ill with fever after they make love. She stays in bed as Thomas takes care of her. Teresa comes back to Prague the second time with her fortuities. A heavy suitcase and a copy of Anna Karenina under her arm, which she feels is her security, pass into Tomas's life. Part 2, chapters 13, 17. During lovemaking, Teresa lets out primal screams. She falls asleep clutching onto Tomas's hand, just as she clutched her own as a child dreaming of the day that she would meet her future love. Teresa tries to adjust to her new life in Prague. While she has much more life experience and is better read than many of the college students in Prague, she feels that she is a fraud and waits to be found out. Teresa feels Tomas is her only link to this life, and she is terrified to lose it. Teresa becomes bored with her job at the Weekly and looks to do more than work in the darkroom where Sabina has gotten her work. She wants to take pictures, and Sabina helps facilitate that dream. Teresa becomes successful as a photographer and gets some pictures published in the Illustrated Weekly. During a celebration of her promotion to photographer, she dances with other men. Tomas becomes jealous. Tomas now understands how Teresa must feel about his infidelities. Kundera asserts Tomas will bear this heavy burden to the end of his life. Kundera returns to Teresa's dream, where she is in a long line of naked women parading around a pool in unison. He analyzes the dream further, pointing out that the women singing and rejoicing in the sameness of their bodies is just as horrific as Teresa being shot for falling out of line. This sameness is what Teresa is trying to overcome. Teresa wants to look in the mirror and see someone of significance and uniqueness. Teresa realizes that this nightmare relates to her feelings of being home with her mother and feeling unexceptional. Tomas's womanizing is reducing her to a face in the crowd. Teresa cannot escape her dreams. She struggles to reconcile her strong love for Tomas and the fear of her dreams at night. Kundera explains that vertigo is not simply the fear of high places, but the feeling that you are being sucked in, that your soul wishes to jump. Part 2, chapters 18, 22. Teresa keeps in contact with her mother. Her mother blames her for all of the bad things in her life, but also claims that Teresa is the only person left to care for her. She eventually tells Teresa that she has cancer. Teresa is overcome with anger toward Thomas's infidelities, as she feels she has forsaken her mother for this philandering man. Tomas has his hospital find out that Teresa's mother does not have cancer, so Teresa does not go to visit her. Teresa is emotionally exhausted and falls in the street, hurting her ankle, so that physically she is in a constant state of vertigo. Teresa recalls the letter Sabina wrote to Tomas asking him to come to her studio and make love. It begins to excite her, and she begins to think that maybe she can share in Thomas's infidelities. She thinks that she can be an assistant to him during his liaisons. Maybe it will not hurt as much, and the dreams will stop. Tomas refuses, but Teresa determines to try to enter this part of his world. She befriends Sabina and spends more time with her. She visits Sabina's studio to take pictures of her. However, Teresa is taken in more by Sabina's art. Sabina's art suggests, as she puts it, on the surface, an intelligible lie. Underneath, the unintelligible truth. All of Sabina's paintings had two distinct and opposing visual images in them. Teresa begins to take photos of Sabina. Sabina plays with a black bowler hat which her grandfather left for her. Teresa eventually proposes Sabina pose nude. Sabina laughs at first, then gets some wine and changes into a robe. She soon throws it open, exposing herself to Teresa. Teresa enjoys using the camera to capture the nude image of her husband's lover. The camera is a weapon but also a shield for Teresa to hide her emotions. Eventually, Sabina takes the camera, Teresa's weapon. She orders her to strip, as Tomas has so many times before. Teresa does, and Sabina snaps a few shots. While there is a palpable tension between the two women, they're frightened by the proximity of their shared secret lives. The session ends as they both awkwardly laugh. Part 2, chapters 23-29. While in previous war crimes, the Russian Empire had operated under a shadow of anonymity. During the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia, there are many photographs taken. Teresa roams the streets taking pictures of tanks, Russian soldiers, and the violence against the siege people. The beginning of the invasion is a wild time, where young girls run up to stoic Russian soldiers and kiss them to see their astonished reactions. Teresa captures all of this on film. Teresa tries to sell some of her photographs in Switzerland to an illustrated weekly, but they are not interested. Despite the beauty of the shots, the editor accepts a portfolio of images from a nude beach from another photographer. He tells Teresa that they are completely different from your pictures. Teresa looks at the pictures and regards the nudist beach photos as the same as her war photos. The editor and another female photographer assume Teresa is offended by the nude photography because she comes from a communist and puritanical country. Teresa is not offended by the photos. However, the comments the editor and female photographer make remind Teresa of her mother's chiding about Teresa's modesty. The woman photographer invites Teresa to lunch to discuss the possibility of Teresa pursuing a career in photography. However, Teresa does not want to be a photographer. Her war photos are something Teresa felt necessary to do. However, she does not feel the need to continue trying to make a career. Photography, like her Anna Karenina book, is just a ticket to be inside Tomas's world. While Teresa is home in Zurich with her dog, Karenin, she empathizes with the weakness of Dubček, the Czechoslovakian leader. While the rest of the country hates him for his compromising and weakness, Teresa recognizes the sensation of succumbing to a stronger power and longs to return to a place where there is weakness. She tells Tomas, "I want you to be old." She wants him to be weak, like herself. Karenin has not gotten used to living in Zurich, as the dog does not like change. One day when Teresa answers the phone, she hears a woman's voice and feels her last bit of strength leave her. She confides in Karenin that she duped Tomas from the start, passing herself off as someone higher than who she is. She leaves a note for Tomas telling him that she and Karenin are leaving that night. Teresa and Karenin return to Prague, where she plans to move outside of the city and give up photography. However, she is caught up in the mundane issues of life, so she does not go. 5 days later, Tomas arrives and moves back with her. While Tomas lies next to Teresa with a stomachache, Teresa recalls that the church bells chimed 6 o'clock when Tomas returned to her. Again, she sees this as a fortuitous event. Part 3, chapters 1. Franz is a university professor in Geneva who visits his mistress, Sabina, after lectures. Franz, like Tomas, has rules regarding his love life. He will not go from Sabina's bed to his wife's bed within the same day. He also does not want to have sex with Sabina in Geneva. Sex is an adventure away from Geneva and his wife. Franz creates speaking engagements and invents other reasons to travel and takes Sabina with him. When Sabina tells Franz that she does not want to go to Palermo, he takes it to mean that she no longer desires him sexually. Although Franz is a good-looking, strong, scholarly man, he is internally weak and insecure. Sabina is the initiator in their relationship. She takes the lead in their sexual liaisons. Sabina begins a sexual game, more with herself than with Franz, by removing her clothes and putting on the bowler hat. It's the same one she once donned when she greeted Thomas naked at the hotel. Franz does not understand Sabina's actions and removes the hat to end the game. He again asks her to go to Palermo and she accepts. Franz is elated that she will go and feels the sense of adventure rushing through him. After Franz leaves, Sabina goes back to the mirror where she had begun her sexual game with Franz and places the bowler hat back on her head. Sabina remembers when Thomas playfully put the bowler hat on her head and how the situation went from a comical action to an exciting sexual escapade. By Thomas putting the bowler hat on her head, he had degraded her femininity. By doing this, it turned on Sabina even more. For Sabina, the bowler hat was a vague reminder of a forgotten grandfather. Second, a memento of her father. Thirdly, a prop for her love games with Tomas. Fourth, it was a sign of her originality. And finally, it was a sentimental object. The bowler hat is a continuing motif in Sabina's life. As Franz could not recognize this, he was exempt from being her lover. Franz's misunderstanding of the semantic meaning of the bowler hat is metaphoric of what keeps him from being a man of consequence to Sabina. Part 3, Chapter 3, A Short Dictionary of Misunderstood Words. Kundera breaks from the story to define certain words by Sabina and Franz. How they perceive the meanings of these words shows the great divide between Sabina and Franz, and helps define them at the same time. Part 3, Chapter 4. Sabina is at a gathering of fellow immigrants and listens to their talk about the Russian invasion and their arguments against the communists. She asks why they aren't in Prague fighting if they are so enraged. The chief speaker berates Sabina, saying that her painting did nothing to stop communism. Kundera then discusses how people assess others not by what they do as people, but by their political beliefs. Sabina further infuriates the distinguished immigrant when she tells him that he resembles Communist President Novotny. Sabina realizes that she is being unreasonable to the immigrants and thinks to herself that she is doing so because she lives to betray. While she empathizes with her fellow compatriots, she felt obliged to break ranks with them and confront them. She thinks to herself that she cannot go on with this way of living much longer. Sabina goes to Franz and wants to surrender herself to him entirely, but she simply kisses him and says, "You don't know how happy I am to be with you." Part 3, Chapter 5, A Short Dictionary of Misunderstood Words. Kundera defines more words that further illuminate Sabina's character and the differences between her and Franz. Part 3, Chapter 6. Marie, Claude, Franz's wife, boasts to guests of enjoying being in a car accident even though she actually fell into a deep depression. She continues to explain how she read many books and came to categorize them by day books and night books and night books. She is a pretentious woman, but she is also very influential and admired in the community. Sabina comes to the gathering to assuage any notion of her and Franz's affair. Marie, Claude, while still in the dark about Sabina and Franz, insults Sabina's necklace just to prove her power to everyone. Part 3, Chapter 7, A Short Dictionary of Misunderstood Words. Kundera's final chapter of definitions completes the picture of Sabina and Franz's relationship. It also illustrates, unconditionally, that Sabina and Franz will never be compatible. Part 3, chapters 8-11. Sabina and Franz get together when he leaves his wife. Sabina immediately feels suffocated, as she did as a girl, and wants to be free. She realizes that she is betraying Franz as he betrayed his wife. In her excitement to find freedom, they make love in a wild frenzy. Franz thinks it is because she is enthralled that he is now hers. Franz returns home for his things. His conscience is bothering him, and he feels that he has hurt Marie. Claude, however, she is strong and as vital as ever. When Franz returns to Sabina's apartment, she does not answer. He returns day after day and finds that she is gone. Franz begins to live on his own and be his own man. This in itself is a victory for him. He creates a little place for himself and lives there with a bookish student who adores him. Franz asks for a divorce from Marie, Claude, but she refuses. Sabina lives in Geneva for 4 years, then Paris for 3. She feels the emptiness of all of the people that she has rejected in her life. One day, she receives a letter from Thomas's son. He informs her that he and Teresa have died in a car accident. Sabina finds solace in a cemetery again. However, she begins to think that a cemetery is simply another place you can never leave. She makes plans to leave Paris. Although Franz loves the bookish girl he lives with, he always thinks of Sabina. He hopes that all of his actions will somehow reach her. When he marches against the occupation, he visualizes Sabina is in the crowd watching. Part 4, chapters 1-6. Teresa comes home from work and smells the sex organs of another woman in Tomas's hair. Teresa wakes up the next morning and notices Karenin waiting as he always did. She realizes that one of her greatest joys is waking up to see Karenin. Tomas listens to a broadcast on the radio. The broadcast is of people whom the communist government has bugged. These tapes reveal the speakers. They are high-profile Sikh immigrants using vulgar language to condemn the Soviet Union's occupation of their country. One of those taped is a most beloved figure in Prague, a novelist named John Prochaska. The tapes expose Prochaska and make fun of some of his friends, including Czech leader Dubček. Teresa goes to the sauna on Zofin Island, which is an exclusive treat to the few very fortunate. Teresa is able to go because of a professor friend of Thomas's. As Teresa walks to the sauna, she notices the aggressive women in the street as some of those whom she photographed at the beginning of the occupation. These women, who at one time were free, spirited, and exuded their sexuality, were now bitter, older women. Teresa prepares to go to the sauna, where she will be naked. She reminisces about her mother and the torture that she felt during her childhood, as she had no privacy. At the spa, Teresa notices a woman who has a pretty face, but an enormous body. She wonders if the woman looks at herself to seek the soul inside, as Teresa does. Teresa then examines her body in the mirror and looks critically at her breasts. Her mother would mock them because they are small. Teresa thinks about how she would be if her body were different. She reviles her physical body because it is not the only one for Tomas. She dresses and leaves the sauna, dejected. Part 4, Chapter 7, 15. Teresa works behind a bar at a hotel in Prague because the Weekly did not forgive her for quitting when she left for Zurich. She works among a former professor of theology and an ambassador, all of whom had lost their jobs for protesting the invasion or crossing the Communist Party. Teresa overhears the ambassador talking to a man whose son has been imprisoned because the communists had photograph evidence of his attacking invading tanks. Teresa is relieved when those photos are not hers. For Teresa, flirting is a heavy, significant act. It lacks the lightness and playfulness that some women innately enjoy. When Teresa does try to flirt, it gives an air of possibility to an illicit relationship. When she backpedals away from it, men consider her a tease. Teresa is harassed by a bald man. A tall man comes to her defense. The tall man comes in the following night, and he and Teresa flirt with each other. Teresa has a dream that Tomas tells her to go to some men who are on Petrin Hill. The view on Petrin Hill is beautiful. The men blindfold Teresa and put her up against a tree to shoot her. When Teresa tells them it was not her idea to go there, they lower their rifles and apologize. They tell her that they cannot shoot her because it must be her own idea to have come. Teresa yearns for the man with the rifle and is afraid of Tomas. Part 4, chapters 15-19. The tall man from the bar is an engineer. He continually comes into the bar and tries to get Teresa to come to his flat. Mimicking her dream, she feels that by going with the engineer that she is following Thomas's commands to play this sexual game. Teresa goes to the engineer's flat. He disappears to get coffee for Teresa. Teresa looks around the flat and sees Oedipus, a book that Thomas had given her years earlier. Teresa allows the engineer to make love to her. Throughout their lovemaking, she is in conflict physically and emotionally. She finally orgasms and spits in the engineer's face at the same time. Teresa goes into the bathroom of the engineer's flat. The bathroom exposes the pipes from the toilet that carry human waste to the sewers below. Kundera uses the metaphor of the toilet to describe Teresa's feeling of despair, feeling vulnerable. Teresa wants to go to the engineer and have him hold her. She hopes to hear a soft, deep voice from the man that would stir her soul. However, his voice is high and thin. She picks up her clothes and leaves. Part 4, chapters 20-24. Teresa walks home from shopping with Karenin and finds a crow that is being pelted with rocks by a couple of little kids. The crow is buried in the ground. Teresa saves the crow and brings it home and into the bathroom. She makes a bed for it. Metaphorically, Teresa feels like the crow, weak and alone. She thinks about the past events with the engineer and realizes that she cannot cheat like Thomas. She fears losing him. Teresa stays with the crow until it is dead. After some time, Teresa begins to yearn for the engineer. She doesn't want an illicit affair, but she is aroused by the idea of her naked body next to someone other than Tomas. In the first few weeks after her affair, she is scared the engineer will come in. When he fails to show, she is frustrated that he does not return and questions herself as to why. During one of her shifts, the bald, headed man returns and insults her again, accusing her of prostitution. The ambassador informs Teresa that the bald-headed man is with the secret police. Teresa begins to think that the engineer was a setup by the secret police. Part 4, chapters 25-29. Teresa, Tomas, and Karenin leave the city limits of Prague to go to a spa they had been to 6 years earlier. However, all the names of the places they see have been changed from Czech names to Russian names. Teresa feels the arbitrariness of life. Teresa also thinks about how the engineer must have been a spy. Everything in her life seems to be some disguise. Underneath it all is the life that she tried to leave behind when she went to live with Thomas. Teresa thinks that the engineer must have taken pictures of them together to use as blackmail against her. As they turn to leave the now Russian spa, an old man comes up to Tomas. The old man knows Tomas and asks him for some medical advice. Teresa becomes increasingly paranoid that the engineer and the bald-headed man will tell her secret to Thomas. Teresa has another dream. She imagines all the park benches of Prague floating down the Vltava River. She understood that what she saw was a farewell. Part 5, chapters 1-4. Kundera recounts the day that Teresa came to visit Tomas in Prague, and she came down with a terrible fever. He parallels the story of Oedipus with Thomas's taking Teresa into his home. Both Oedipus and Tomas are responsible for their misery and that of those they love. Tomas further ruminates on the story of Oedipus in regards to the communist occupation of Czechoslovakia. As Oedipus unknowingly slept with his mother, some who originally followed the communists claim they did not know the atrocities Russia would bring. However, Tomas points out that at least Oedipus could blame himself and feel the guilt of his actions and put his eyes out. He is disgusted that the repentant communist followers cannot do the same. Tomas writes a letter to the editor of a weekly paper with his O Oedipus communist thesis. While Tomas's letter is edited to a point he does not like, it is printed and creates a stir in Prague. When Tomas returns to Prague from Zurich to be with Teresa, he goes back to the hospital to continue being a surgeon. The chief surgeon informs him that, in order to keep his job at the hospital, Tomas must admit a retraction to the Oedipus letter. Tomas does not care much about the letter, but his pride is at stake. He asks for a week to think it over. The chief surgeon is rumored to retire, and Tomas will take his place. As more becomes at stake for Tomas, everyone in the hospital is waiting for his inevitable retraction. When a young, smug physician questions Tomas about his impending retraction, Tomas decides he will not write the letter out of spite for those waiting for it and his own pride. He is dismissed from the hospital. Part 5, chapters 5-6. Tomas works as a general practitioner at a country clinic. It is busy and unrewarding. He is visited by a man from the ministry who charms and flatters Tomas into a conversation about the Oedipus's letter. Tomas confides that his original letter was cut by the paper. The man from the ministry interrogates Tomas further as to who edited the letter. Tomas describes the editor in exact opposition to his real physical traits. The man from the ministry seems to know someone, however, that fits that description. Tomas goes along with it. The man from the ministry tells Tomas that he will see what he can do about getting Tomas back into the hospital to work. 2 weeks later, the man from the ministry visits Tomas, and they talk in Tomas's office. The man from the ministry offers Tomas a written statement to sign declaring his recanting of the Oedipus letter. Tomas thinks it over and resigns from the clinic, feeling that he may finally be so low in society that they will not care what he has written. Tomas now becomes a window washer. Part 5, chapters 7-9. Kundera reviews Tomas's move to Prague, his mantra is Masin, and his decision to leave medicine. He questions Tomas's motives for leaving medicine. After all, except for Teresa, who was the product of the 6 coincidences, medicine was his reason for being. Tomas meditated on the line is Masin, but he did not know its origin or intention other than it was a line from a Beethoven movement. The line came about when a Demschur who owed Beethoven was asked to pay and said, "Muss es sein?" Must it be? To which Beethoven replied, "Es muss sein." It must be. Kundera says, the German language can be very heavy in meaning, and Beethoven turned this rather insignificant event and lines into a serious quartet, a joke into a metaphysical truth. Kundera points out how this is an example of light going to heavy. Tomas enjoys the banality of his new profession as a window washer. There is no esma scene to this job, and he enjoys the sense of lightness that comes with it. The citizens of Prague would celebrate the fallen intellectuals to defy the Russian government. Tomas was invited, as a window washer, to many ex-patients' homes where they would drink champagne and talk. With his newfound career and lack of responsibility, Tomas has many hours to devote to women. He sleeps with many housewives, salesgirls, and other women during his window, washing hours, and the hours Teresa is at work. Kundera makes a point that Tomas is not simply trying to have sex with many women for the physical aspect. He is trying to find their I, that which makes them unique. As Kundera puts it, it's the 1,000,000th part dissimilarity. Part 5, chapters 10, 12. Kundera defines and distinguishes between two types of womanizers. The lyrical womanizer seeks his ideal woman in all women. However, because no woman can meet this lofty standard, he is disappointed and moves on to the next woman. The other type of womanizer is the epic womanizer, and Tomas represents this one. The epic womanizer is interested in women only for themselves. He is obsessed with all women, no matter how different they are. Kundera explains that women and people in general are more accepting of the lyrical womanizer as they have redemption by their disappointment. The epic womanizer is never disappointed, as it appears that he is without redemption or thought for his deeds. The lyrical looks for the same woman in all women, so their physical traits are always similar. The epic's interests take him through a myriad of women who range from the banal to beautiful to bizarre in appearance and behavior. One such woman for Tomas is a woman for whom he washes her windows. She looked like an odd combination of giraffe, stork, and sensitive young boy. They flirt with each other to the point where Tomas is touching her, and she withdraws, telling him to come back another day, to finish what I kept you from starting. Tomas returns, and as they engage in lovemaking, he orders her to strip as he always does with his women. She refuses and tells him to strip. During their sexual encounter, she does things to him that no other woman has done before. Her physical being is so different from other women that Tomas is enthralled at having conquered one more woman he had not had before. One day, Tomas sees a girl that he made love to in a tremendous storm. The girl remembers the scene and recounts how beautiful it was. Tomas cannot remember the storm and realizes he only remembers the sexual act with women, not the story that goes with it. In this way, he is deficient and loses the beauty in those moments. He realizes that Teresa occupies the poetic memory that retains the moments he does not capture with other women. Part 5, chapters 13, 16. Tomas remembers how upset Teresa has been with the abused crow and being accused of prostitution by the bald-headed man. He does not want to go to work, but goes anyway, hoping not to have to be with any woman. His assignment is with two men who turn out to be his son and the editor from the magazine. They explain to him that they are trying to thwart the communist takeover and want him to sign a petition along with other lost Czech intellectuals, denouncing the poor treatment of political prisoners. Tomas feels compelled to sign, as it is a plea from his own son. However, the more the editor and his son talk about his duty to sign and what a great thing it was that he wrote the Oedipus article, Thomas begins to think about what it is that he is doing and why. He tells them it was more important for him to be a doctor and save lives than to write the Oedipus's letter. He regrets that. He thinks of Teresa and realizes that this may endanger her. Finally, he apologizes, but does not sign the petition. Tomas reads about the petition in the paper and feels conflicted about whether he should have signed it or not. Kundera parallels Tomas's life and decisions with those of the history of the Sikh nation. He intimates that life decisions are very difficult to get right, if not impossible, because we only have one chance at it with no previous knowledge. History is as light as individual human life, unbearably light. Light as a feather, as dust swirling into the air, as whatever will no longer exist tomorrow. Several days later, Tomas thinks of a notion that maybe we are on one planet one and graduate to other planets, where we do the same things, but with the knowledge of having done it before. For Tomas, this is eternal return. Part 5, Chapter 17, 23. Tomas begins to think that he may be on holidays for too long. He has been window washing for 3 years and thinks it is time to move on. He meets a woman in the street whom he has had before, but cannot place her and realizes that he is physically and mentally tired. During a trip to the spa, where all of the Sikh names were replaced by Russian names, Tomas is asked medical advice. He thinks that it was a mistake for him to leave Zurich and come back to Prague. He is furious with Teresa. They do not speak until Teresa has a bad dream that involves her suffering from Tomas's infidelity. He holds her as she cries. Tomas attends a funeral for a biologist friend. There, he sees the editor and goes to talk with him. The editor puts him off. Tomas wonders if it is because he is protecting him or dismissing him out of spite. Later that day, Tomas is washing a window at a shoe shop when S, the young doctor from his old hospital, bumps into him. They chat awkwardly, and Tomas realizes that his so-called courageous deed, not writing the retraction, has run its course. The degraded intellectuals were no longer in favor. Tomas is weary, both mentally and physically. He and Teresa discuss how they have grown tired of Prague, and she suggests a move to the country. They discuss it as Thomas gets stomach sick and tells Teresa that they will move to the country. Tomas has several strangely erotic dreams. He concludes that his aggressive sexual nature is endangering the only one he loves. He stares at Teresa, determined not to let his base sexual desires hurt her any longer. Part 6, Chapters 1-10. Kundera discusses the circumstances and death of Stalin's son, Yakov. Yakov was a privileged young man until the Germans imprisoned him. Yakov is accused of going to the bathroom in an unauthorized area. As he has gone from the height of aristocracy to a prisoner being accused of shit, he can no longer take the humility and hurls himself into an electric fence. Kundera discusses the idea of creation and the Bible, including Adam and Eve. He points out that because we were expelled from paradise, we were able to experience shit and its opposition, blinding love. This is why it is possible for Sabina to feel so turned on when she wears the bowler hat with Tomas. Kundera also defines kitsch and Sabina's hatred of it. Sabina rejects the communist world because of its aesthetics, that it hid the atrocities behind things like the May Day parade. Sabina eventually moves to America. One day in America, Sabina takes a ride with a senator and his children. The children playing in the grass move her. Part 6, Chapters 11-23. Sabina's artwork and life resemble truth and lies intermingled. This produces one who views it to ask questions. As kitsch does not allow for questions, it is directly opposed to Sabina's nature. During an art exhibition, she disagrees with the bio that has been written about her. She does not believe her art to be a struggle for happiness and explains she is not against communism, but against kitsch. From this point on, she fabricates things about herself, so her bios are not offensive to her. Sabina now lives in the metaphorical ideal of a home. She has a space in an older family's house, where she feels like a daughter to the couple. The old man loved her paintings and offered her a space in his house to live and work. Kundera explains that political kitsch is simply the left or the right. Europe is divided into leftist belief and right belief. There is not much difference in the process of governing, and it does not even matter much. Only that one partakes in the rituals of whichever side they have chosen. France partakes in all events, especially the Grand March. The kitsch of this is that while it is meant to represent this leftist thinking, it is merely pomp and circumstance. It's a beautiful illusion that Franz would follow and feel as if he has accomplished some feat. Franz is invited to fight injustice in Cambodia. He refuses at first, but thinks to himself that it is similar to the issues of Sabina's country. He feels connected to her through it and agrees to go. There are many countries represented at the Cambodian protest, and the French and Americans clash over who will lead the discussion. An American actress, a German poet, a pop singer, and Franz are among many who board buses to protest at the Cambodian border. The doctors have come to try to help the sick and injured. A cameraman follows along documenting the march. As a photographer attempts to get in a better position to shoot the American actress, he steps on a mine and is blown to bits. His blood and guts are sprayed all over the American actress, German singer, and the flag they are holding. They hold the flag higher and with more pride than ever. The march gets to a bridge, and they call over to the Khmer to allow them to go over the bridge unharmed. They receive no response. Franz thinks, while the march is stalled and they continue to call over in vain, that it all seems pointless. He has an urge to run across the bridge through gunfire and die doing something other than standing in this futile march. However, they all leave after the third call solicits no response. Part 6, chapters 24-29. Simon, Thomas's son, hears that Thomas and his wife were killed in an automobile accident. He learns about Sabina and begins writing her long letters. Simon is attempting to try to have someone interested in his life. Over the years, Sabina stops reading the letters. She thinks about the death of Thomas and Teresa and their bodies buried in the ground under all of that weight of the earth. She declares in her will that she wishes to be cremated and her ashes scattered in the winds. She chooses lightness as opposed to the weight that Thomas and Teresa are under. Franz comes to realize that he loves the bookish girl with the glasses and wants to leave Cambodia immediately. He is attacked and left for dead. When he wakes up, he is in a hospital in Geneva and Marie. Claude is there. Although he yearns for the bookish girl, he cannot move, speak, or motion these feelings. Marie, Claude mistakes Franz's looks of hate for admiration and Franz seeking forgiveness. She takes care of all of his funeral arrangements and exerts ownership of him once again. Kundera summarizes the lives as the lives and deaths of Thomas, Franz, and the dying population in Cambodia. Part 7, Chapters 1. Thomas and Teresa sell all of their belongings to live in the country in a small cottage with a garden. Teresa is happy not to have to smell women's groins and Thomas's hair, and not to be subjected to drunks at the bar. Teresa's vision of Sunday church, taverns and dances did not exist under communist law. Thomas and Teresa are at a great advantage when they go to the country because everyone is trying to leave the village. They become good friends with the collective farm chairman. Karenin finds a new friend in Mephisto, the chairman's pet pig. Karenin becomes sick with cancer, and Thomas operates on him. The cancer spreads, and Karenin's health declines rapidly. Teresa becomes more empathetic towards the cows and pigs she tends and Karenin. She sits under a tree, caressing Karenin's head, thinking about the nature of man and animals' relationship in the world. Kundera draws a parallel of Nietzsche and Teresa's view of mankind. Teresa has a dream that Karenin gives birth to two roles in a bee. Both Teresa and Thomas try to get Karenin to play and show some signs of life. They try to take Karenin for a walk, but he just limps along for a little while, then has to turn back. Teresa walks in on Thomas as he is reading a letter that he quickly folds and puts in his pocket. Teresa begins to feel the despair and jealousy that she thought they had left behind in Prague. Teresa traces a rectangle in the yard for where they will bury Karenin. The tensions of Karenin's impending death take a toll on Tomas and Teresa, and they get into an argument. Teresa analyzes her love for Karenin versus the love in human relationships. She realizes that her love for Karenin and Karenin's love for her is a perfect, selfless love. Part 7, Chapters 5-7. Tomas and Teresa prepare to give Karenin the shot to euthanize him. They give Karenin the shot and bring him to the place where Teresa outlined the rectangle to bury him. She remembers her dream and thinks, here lies Karenin. He gave birth to 2 roles and a B should be the epitaph. Teresa has a horrible dream. Tomas is reading a letter, and he is forced to go to the airport and go back to Prague. Teresa insists on going with him. A man with a gun goes to shoot Thomas, who then shrinks and turns into a rabbit and runs. In the end, Teresa gets hold of the rabbit and presses it to her face. Teresa again finds Tomas reading a letter at his desk. This time, she asks him what the letter is. Tomas explains that it is his son, Simon, who is writing to him. Teresa tells Thomas to invite Simon up for dinner. Teresa sees Tomas trying to fix a flat tire on the old truck they own. Tomas is very poor at caring for the truck, and it is in disrepair. As Teresa watches from behind a tree, she notices how old Thomas appears to her. She realizes that she has gotten what she always wanted. She will grow old with Tomas and feel that he is finally hers. The chairman and Tomas burst into the house in a jovial mood. Tomas had fixed a farm worker's dislocated shoulder. They all drink Slivovitz and plan to go to a dance. As they dance, Teresa confides she is sorry that she made Thomas leave Zurich to come to Prague and lose his practice. Thomas tells her that he has never been happier than in the country with her. They drink and dance into the night and finally go upstairs to a room they are staying the night in.